Say in the US, I was a little bit of a workaholic.
How long were you addicted to workahol? We can get you help.
Thank you.
Thank God you're here, because today we're comparing our experiences and our careers when it comes to work-life balance in Denmark and America. So what is work-life balance? You've probably heard of work-life balance, but in case you haven't, it basically refers to how a person allocates their time between their job and their other interests. It's the pursuit of harmony between your career and a person's life. In short, work-life balance is how well you're preventing your paid career from invading the other parts of your life. Wherever you live and whatever culture you live in, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you have to divide that between your job, your family, leisure activities. Achieving a balance between work and non-work activities requires choices, and those decisions can be difficult.
Yeah, work-life balance in Denmark has long been rated one of the best in Europe and probably the whole world. According to the OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Denmark actually ranks #1 in work-life balance. Work-life balance in America is ranked number 28. But since we've worked in both countries, and we think we can now come share our personal experiences in both. Of course, as a caveat, we haven't worked at every single company or every single region of both countries, so your experience might and will be different. And if you're willing to share your own experience with us and the rest of the road trading community, please come and add a comment down below, or join our Facebook group where we can continue the conversation there.
Yeah, and while some research varies, there are said to be 6 components of work-life balance. So for this video, we decided to talk about each one of them. And we'll also share some related anecdotes of what we've experienced as we've been working in both Denmark and the US. So Mike, do you want to start with the odds or the evens?
Is it odd that I want the evens?
Fine, I'll start us off. Okay, so managing yourself, that seems simple enough, right? Well, not as much when you really think about it. See, this is a component that involves getting adequate sleep, exercising, and maintaining a healthy diet. Ha! We all know that can be a bit of a challenge. So self-management involves recognizing that we need space in our lives. It also requires us to face the fact that our resources, our time, and even our lives themselves are finite. So that's why we need to make the most out of the time that we do have. And we have to manage ourselves in order to make that happen. So let's compare the two countries. So according to the OECD, Danish full-time workers spend about 66% of a typical day working on personal care and leisure activities. This is above the OECD average of 63%. In the United States, workers spend only 60% of their day on personal care and leisure activities, which lands America below average at the same margin. So for personal care and self-management, America is not doing quite as well as Denmark is. And self-management is definitely something that you see in both America and Denmark. I feel like in Denmark, it's basically starting before you even leave the house in the morning. You know, a lot of people in Denmark do bike to work, and that's because we have great bike infrastructure. You know, that's something that at every level of government and life is important. And most offices, most business places of business will actually have a locker room and a place for you to change for those who bike into work.
Yeah, and that's really nice. I know my commute's pretty far here in Denmark, but you've had much shorter commutes where you've biked to work.
Yeah.
Actually, I biked to work in Philadelphia when I worked there, but I was definitely the exception. It was probably a little bit of a dangerous ride when I did that. Didn't have the same sort of shower facilities and stuff to make it easy to do that sort of commute by any means. So I totally agree with you there. And it's nice here with all the biking because it kind of also means that you get some exercise built into your commute. I know in the US, both of us had some really long commutes, more than an hour for a period of time. That's a lot of time wasted just sitting in the car, not doing anything beyond just the stress of the commute in your day.
Yeah, I used to, well, we lived in Philadelphia, but I worked in the suburbs. So my commute there was well over an hour. And that also meant that I was not having a good breakfast. I was stopping for donuts or an Egg McMuffin or something on the way in. And I think when you have a long commute, it kind of takes that time out of your day. So you're not having the time to take care of yourself. And the last thing you want to do when you're short on time, especially when you're hungry, you just want to eat something. So a lot of times that means you're going to fast food or some kind of quick service food. even for American lunches, that happens a lot too.
Yeah, I think it's a big contrast between the US and Denmark as well, where in Denmark, most office places have a canteen or a catered lunch that comes in. It's pretty healthy options along the way, a nice hearty meal, and it makes for a break in the day. Like it's 30 minutes that you take away from your desk, go socialize with your colleagues. Sure, you're going to talk a little bit about work there, but mostly it's hearing about what people are doing for their holidays or what their kids are up to and things like that. So it's a nice mental break in the middle of the day. In the US, I rarely would do something like that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, some places that I worked, we had an actual kitchen or something that we could go to eat, but there were definitely times when it was busy where I would just eat at my desk. It just depends. I think better workplaces, it is something that gets some attention in America. So I think that I did work at one office that had a canteen in the office park, but it was still the same way. If it was very busy, people were just grabbing food and eating at their desk. And people don't really do that in Denmark. They take the time, they take that mental break in the middle of the day, and that's important. I think even in the hours, it's a bit reflected as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one thing. If we were to summarize all of that, I think there's one big contrast between the US and Denmark in this way. It's that in the US, it's very common to brag about how many hours you work. You don't necessarily say of like, I'm better than you, but it's like, oh, I had to put in so many hours this week and things like that. I work 45 hours a week. Yeah. Bit of a badge of honor.
It's like a badge of honor, like a war story. And in Denmark, you probably get looked down on. If you were saying that you worked 45 hours that week. In Denmark, the work week is 37 and a half hours. People would probably look at you like you must be really bad at your job because you're not getting it done in 37 and a half hours.
Or your company's
or your
really
boss
bad.
Doesn't care about you. Yeah. It would be more looked at like something's wrong here, but it's it's not the fact that everybody else worked less. It's why are you working so much? Are you bad at your job? Is your job a bad place to work because they're not allocating the workload properly? Yeah, it would be looked at very differently than in the US.
Yeah. Time management is probably one of the most familiar components of the work-life balance. It involves making efficient use of every day with the limited resources that you have available, and time is the most limited resource we have. Good time management involves having enough resources to meet all your challenges. It includes goal setting, prioritizing all sorts of tasks, and to do this well, we have to rely on outside tools and often teams of other people to get things done. Despite limited working hours, Denmark's actually one of the world's highest productive countries. Danes are the second most productive workers in Europe after only Ireland. Danes are more productive than workers in the US despite working only 1,380 hours per year compared to 1,779 in the US. Well, when it comes to time management, I think one of the key things I've learned working in Denmark for the last 4.5 years is that really here you're generally trusted to manage your own time. And there's more of a focus on the work that you deliver, and that's how you're more or less held accountable.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Denmark, compared to the US, I feel, is not a country where you're micromanaged. In fact, ask any Dane, they'll probably talk to you about what's called a flat management style, which means that you're basically trusted, you pretty much have autonomy. And unlike the US, where people do tend to micromanage, especially if targets aren't being hit or quotas not being hit or productivity isn't what somebody expects or the stockholders want to see, then you start to see action plans and micromanagement and performance improvement plans. And in Denmark, it's just not like that because I always like to think you're judged in Denmark more on your outputs than your inputs. So it doesn't matter how many hours you're working. It doesn't matter how many emails you're sending. It doesn't matter like on make sure you're hitting all the metrics. You know, what really matters is the output.
Yeah, I think you can see in the US, whether it's an overt company policy or just a natural work culture, it's a lot based on how many hours you put in. Are you answering emails all across the evening and the nights and things like that? And I know that I work for companies that have actually discouraged this sort of activity in the US as well, but it's just kind of a natural thing that happens culturally of that we always want to seem available. We always want to seem like we're the first in the door and the last to leave. And people who don't do that are looked as not as invested or not as hard of a worker.
And sometimes it ends up coming through. It's almost like people are working harder to look busy than to actually get things done. And if you don't have enough work, it's okay, but they just like to look like they're always busy, and it's kind of a facade.
Yeah, I think one of the big things when it comes to time in Denmark versus the US, I'd say in general, Denmark has a much higher culture of trust culture-wide than is in the US. And you really see it in the time where managers are much more trusting of their workers to be efficient in their time. And in the US, there's kind of a fear that if somebody's working from home, that they're kind of stealing from the company a little bit. Just a bit of the kind of the culture that infuses in that way.
So it makes sense that as a society grows, it becomes more complex. Now, over time, that complex lifestyle that we all love actually adds to stress in each one of our individual lives. Think about it. Multitasking is way more stressful than only worrying about one thing at a time. And stress management requires that each of us find ways to maintain that tranquility, stability, and that we can navigate pressure-filled situations. So stress is inevitable. It's a natural part of life, and each society has to help people to deal with the different levels of stress that they're going to face. Coping and dealing with stress is interesting because in Denmark, only about 2% of employees are stressed out by very long working hours. This is compared to the OECD average of 11. Now in America, 11.1% of workers report working long hours. So this is right on average, but still not great. So there are definitely times in the US and in Denmark where I felt like I either was getting things done too soon or I didn't have enough time or enough resources to get things done. And that stress of not knowing where to go or what to do is always difficult. But I definitely find that I've had good managers in the US, but I feel like that relationship is a little bit more open door. I think every manager in the US always says, oh, I have an open door policy, you can come in anytime. But how true it is and how they actually take your feedback and apply it is different. I feel a lot more heard in Denmark as far as from management, and I definitely feel like I have the ability to kind of manage myself and my outputs a little bit more, where in the US you're kind of just told to figure it out or told what to do. And
yeah, and I think speaking on stress as kind of the work-life balance element, I mean, we all know every company, no matter where, is always going to have stressful situations. And I think this is a case where we mentioned before about how in the US the culture tends towards a little bit of managing down, getting a little bit more into micromanagement, where again, I think you mentioned a point earlier talking about how it's a little bit also about looking like you're being active, looking like you're solving the problem, which sometimes can actually mean that you're spinning your wheels a little bit because people are having to both get these extra reports out and also do their job to fix whatever stressful situation that they're in. In Denmark, at least the way that I've seen it, has been that it's a little bit more where the manager is going to lay out the priorities, say this is where we have to go, but maybe not get as deep in on telling the team what to do, but kind of directing them in a little more of a way. Probably part of it too is because the culture is that people are going to work their hours, and at a certain point, people will stay over obviously to get the job done. I'm not saying this is a culture where people just leave at 4:30 if the house is on fire, but also it's one where the manager wants to manage his time resources because he doesn't really want his team to stay late.
yeah, and I think I also feel like, again, going back to that, being able to talk to your manager, it's the kind of thing where it also works the other way, where your manager will talk to you too. And if you seem like you're stressed, if you seem like you're burning out, it's something that I think is taken very seriously in Denmark and in the US. Obviously, not in every company, but I've definitely worked for places in the US where I felt like I was looked at as, well, if he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it. We'll just hire somebody else. Everybody needs a job right now, especially when I was starting out my career right out of university. I was basically looked at like, well, somebody else will do that job. And, they really just burn and churn people. And I noticed that because, well, I didn't leave. But once I was maybe 4 years into that company, eventually I did leave. But I really felt like you're not valued as much. And I have managers in Denmark now that I know at certain points in my career in the US, if they were my manager under these same cultural influences, they would have pulled me aside and said, what's going on? I think you need a couple days off. Why don't you take a couple days out on stress and come back when you're ready? And that definitely isn't the case in the US.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is that it's part of the dialogue, that people talk about it openly, talk about being stressed. People talk about that they've had conversations about stress. And I think that's a good thing, though I will say I see a lot of change in the US this way of having these conversations, which I think is a really positive thing because it's real. And when you don't talk about things, that's when they can really go haywire.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like the thing you can rely on most in life is change. In modern society, we're constantly faced with new approaches and methods. This forces us to continuously adapt and evolve as we keep up with the innovation. This is all known as change management. Change management is crucial to a happy life and successful career because we have to keep up with the changes without getting overwhelmed. Mitigating the damages that can be done by constant change is absolutely important to our mental health. Balancing the right volume of change at home and work is a major part of work-life balance. Change management actually, I think, is an area where the US and Denmark are closer to each other than maybe some other countries are with this. Denmark obviously has a reputation for being a culture of collaboration where things are always decided in a meeting, or as we know, maybe sometimes many meetings. But I feel like the US also has a pretty hybrid solution, maybe a little bit of top-down management, but also a real sense of collaboration and working together and a little bit of entrepreneurship to take decisions as well.
Yeah, and personally, this is something that I almost prefer the culture a little bit better in the US, and maybe it's because that's just maybe it spreads out into other parts of kind of our cultural identity as well. But sometimes in Denmark, I've been in meetings where I'm like, why am I here? Nothing in my job function touches this decision. I appreciate being pulled into this meeting about strategy, but it really, I'm out of place. But I sometimes feel like I prefer that top-down approach a little bit because it's like, well, you're the manager. You tell me what to do. You tell me the decision. I'm fine with it. But give me the autonomy to carry it out the way that I see.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like, and I've started to build here, is kind of blend the two together, where I have a little bit of decisiveness, encourage a little bit of collaboration and conversation on stuff, but also try to get to a decision.
Yeah.
I think especially because something that I have seen happen is sometimes the groups that work together in Denmark can be a little bit homogenous. Part of this is due to hiring, where a lot of hiring is on the assumption that your credentials are your credentials, so you want to have a good fit with the team, which can mean that you get a little bit of groupthink going on. And can be one thing where maybe there's a big difference between the US and Denmark here, where in Denmark sometimes being a little bit of a dissenting voice can be a little bit of a challenge because you're going to be kind of out of sync with the rest of the team, whereas in the US I feel like having a contrarian view is a bit of a badge of honor, as being that guy who says hard truths or is unafraid to speak their mind, which is seen as kind of a valuable thing in a workplace.
Yeah, I definitely noticed both of those things.
Yeah.
Now we'll talk about technology management. We all know technology plays a huge role in society and it can make our lives better, but it should serve us and not the other way around. A different way to put that is that technological advances have made our work functions easier, but they also bring work into our home life and at all hours of the day. Nobody likes that. Part of technology management means keeping up with the latest technological advances, but making sure that we have the technological resources to thrive, but not intrude on our lives. We often have no choice. To keep up with technology means that we have to be careful of how we're managing technology, and again, making sure that it's not managing us.
Obviously, technology has changed so much of how we work, especially in the last year and a half or so. But I feel like a key part is with our little mobile phones, and how in the US people feel like they have to answer emails constantly because they have a phone, whereas in Denmark I think people feel like when they're off work hours they're willing to let it sit until the next day, which is a little bit funny because many people in Denmark actually have their mobile phone provided by the office, but that's not something they have to use every single minute of the day. So that's been a bit of a nice change for me in Denmark, because I could say in the US I was a little bit of a workaholic.
How long were you addicted to workahol? We can get you help.
Thank you.
Sorry. But, seriously, Danish workplaces tend to be a bit more technology driven in really every kind of industry. And I think that's partially because, it does aid in productivity and efficiency, and Denmark is a very productive and efficient country and place to work. And given the higher wages, the use of technology just kind of makes sense. So you can definitely expect that if you do come to work in Denmark, that you're probably going to have the best apps and gadgets and things to help you do your job.
Yeah, and I think one of the little things that I really like here is it's also in the physical workplace, where because there are either so many rules or the various unions have so much influence on how the actual workplace is, it means that you're going to have good light wherever you work, and the best thing is almost everybody's going to have one of those raising and lowering desks, which is almost standard practice here to make sure your desk is always the right height for ergonomics.
Yeah, my first job, we weren't even allowed to get onto the regular internet, so we couldn't check our regular email.
It goes back to that trust and culture
Well, yeah,
thing.
maybe, yes, but in Denmark that would never happen.
That would never happen. Yeah.
I don't think in the U.S. anymore either.
No, I think we've gone past that. So for most people, leisure management is the most enjoyable component of work-life balance. Still, it's one of the easiest to overlook because of societal pressures and other outside influences. The principle of leisure management focuses on the importance of recuperating during our time off. It emphasizes the vital component of rest and relaxation to our survival. While we shouldn't shortchange our leisure time, we also need to ensure that we vary our activities and avoid the monotony of too much leisure time. Here in Denmark, to align with leisure management, the Danish Holiday Act actually gives all workers in Denmark 5 weeks off of paid time, and many get an additional week outside of that law. They're also guaranteed the right to take 3 consecutive weeks of summer holiday, and it's not uncommon for people to use up every single minute of their vacation time. In the US, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American receives 10 days or only 2 weeks of paid vacation in their first year, and it takes on average 5 more years at an employer to get that third week. This is of course not transferable to another employer, and it is in no way mandated by the government. So leisure time, this is where there's definitely a big difference between the two countries. In the US, even if you have vacation time, whenever you ask for it, it feels like you're asking for a favor from your boss, whereas in Denmark, you just put it on the schedule and enjoy your 3-week holiday.
Yeah, in fact, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, and we had sort of a last minute vacation plan come together. I want to say it was maybe 30 days, maybe 3 weeks. And I told my boss, like, so we decided to book a trip, and some of our friends are coming over from the US. And he was like, what are you getting at? I'm like, well, I'd like a long weekend in 3 weeks. And he was like, is anybody else off? I was like, nope. He said, put it in the calendar. Okay. And it's still just, it's so hard to get over that weird feeling of like, oh, so you mean I get to control my vacation time? I don't have to beg and ask for permission to take off, and it's not going to depend how productive or what my sales are or what quotas we're at or how productive the office is. Like, I can just take it. And yeah, that's how it is in Denmark.
I think a lot of it too is it's like an obligation that you're going to make sure that it works with your colleagues. And there's kind of that, again, that trust factor that as a manager, if you want to take time off, like you figure out, you make sure that the company's going to keep running, you have a backup or whatever else, like, and it works out fine that way.
Yeah, in fact, my cousin, hey, what's up, Steve? In Georgia, actually, the state, actually posted this meme on Facebook that kind of said, European away message, I'll be summering by backpacking all around Europe. I'll be back in September. And American away message on your computer, I'm getting kidney surgery for 2 hours. If you need me, you can reach me on my cell phone. And, you know, I did have to laugh, but I realized it's because of the society that's been built here, and you have to invest in it, and it's all about the workers' rights and the unions and those people that have fought for that.
Yeah, and that's why in Denmark, I mean, by law, you have 5 weeks of vacation, and you have the right to have 3 consecutive weeks in the summertime. And many people get more than that because maybe they work extra hours per week. I know at my job, I get extra vacation because we work a longer work day. And in fact, many companies in Denmark also have a bit of a hybrid schedule where they know they have a busier period of work. And so they'll build in schedules with longer hours so that they can have in the off period shorter hours for people. So they can, you know, in some cases, you may get done with work at 2:30 in the low periods because you worked longer hours when it was busier in those months.
Yeah, and I remember when I was living in the US and working in the US, and before moving to Denmark was even on our radar, you know, I would be like, oh, that must be so nice. I can't believe they get to go on 3-week vacations in the summer and still have more vacation time left for when they finish. And it really
is nice.
It is. It's super nice. But you know what, America? Fight for it. Yeah. Don't take a job that doesn't give you that, and look for something else, even if it pays less to do that. You know, it's
And for companies, if you're watching this, like people need time off to recharge. There's a reason why productivity is as high in Denmark as it is. It's because people have the right to be refreshed and recharged. People get burned out, and this is a good way to be able to manage that so people are always fresh and able to deliver the best that they can.
Yeah, if you're not taking your leisure time in Denmark, your boss will actually come up to you and say, what's wrong? I just got a note from HR that you have all this vacation time left. Why aren't you taking it?
Yeah.
And same thing, if you are on vacation trying to answer emails, you're going to hear from your boss.
Yeah.
Like, nope, go relax. And it's kind of nice.
So to kind of sum it up, you can probably hear from us that we like the work-life balance in Denmark better than it was in the US. Though I have to say, many companies in the US are making huge strides to concern this about their employees and try to make that work-life balance better, because I know it's better for everybody overall.
Yeah, but that's something that comes because workers' rights are much stronger here.
Yeah.
That's because the labor movement has been much stronger here, and because unions are much stronger in Denmark. Part of the reason that they're so strong are because they have never been villainized politically like they have been in the US. And the unions here really don't have to fight for that much. It's more of the side benefits that are nice because so much is already provided by the government as far as university and college reimbursement, healthcare, childcare, pension. So the things that unions fight for in the US are already handled and aren't something that people are worried about in Denmark.
And it's funny because I see that the turnover in Denmark is so much higher. And I think part of it is that people are interested in having the right work-life balance or the right kind of fringe benefits that come along with the job. And since you have things like healthcare, pension already secured for you from the country, you're not worried about these things. Where in the US, you're nervous because you don't know what healthcare plan you're going to get. And it could be a gap in coverage or a problem for your retirement plan. So a huge difference there that just gives people that freedom here, which you don't really have in the US.
Yeah. So a lot to cover, a lot that we did cover. Gosh, I feel like there are probably 10 more videos we could make from this, but let us know what you think in the comments and make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Make sure you subscribe to our channel if you haven't already and hit the bell to be notified when we drop new videos. Typically, that's every Thursday. So thank you guys so much for being here with us. Thank you for listening and we'll see you soon.